Neddie and Beckie Stubtail climb a pole. When Neddie and Beckie Stubtail, the two little bear children, had run away from home, as I told you in the story before this one, and had come to the woods where they heard the horn blowing, they did not know just what to do. "That," said Beckie as she held her doll, Mary Ann Pudding Stick clothespin, tightly in her arms, "that surely must be the kind man who has the trained bear with the ring in his nose. Now we are safe, and we will get many good things to eat, Neddie." "We had better take a peep before we run out from behind this bush," said Neddie, slow and careful-like. "Perhaps it is some other man with a horn trying to fool us." You know, the bear children had met in the woods one day a nice, kind, trained bear, and with him was a man called the Professor, who led the bear around by a rope fast to a ring in the bear's nose. And the trained bear did tricks, such as turning somersaults and standing on his head, while the man collected in his hat pennies that people tossed to him. The trained bear invited Neddie to travel around with him, promising that he would have popcorn and other good things to eat. But at first Neddie was afraid of the man with the brass horn. So he ran home. But the more Neddie thought of it, the more he wanted to run away and become a traveling trained bear. So he got his sister Beckie to go with him, and away they ran in the evening, leaving their home and their papa and mamma, and Aunt Piffy, the fat bear lady, and Uncle Wigwag, and Mr. Whitewash, the polar bear, and all their friends. Then they came to the woods and heard the brass trumpet blowing, as I have told you. "Can you see anything?" asked Beckie as she looked over her brother's head while he was peering through the holes in a bramble bush. "Not yet," answered Neddie. Just then there came another blast on the brass trumpet, and Neddie cried, "Oh yes, there he is." And then Beckie saw the tame bear with the ring in his nose instead of in an ear where some ladies wear theirs. And with the tame bear was the man with the long pole. "Now, George," the man was saying, "I guess we'll go to sleep, and in the morning we'll do some more tricks and get more pennies. Hoop-la! There's your supper, George." "I guess it's time for us to run out now," said Neddie to his sister when he heard the word supper. "Yes," said Beckie, "I guess it is." You see, it was really after supper time, and Beckie and Neddie had eaten theirs before they ran away from home. But running away makes you hungry, whether you've had supper or not, I suppose. Out ran the two bear children, and Beckie was especially very glad they had found the tame bear, for it was getting real late, and, though the moon was shining brightly, still she wanted company. "Hello, what's this?" cried the man with the pole as he saw Neddie and Beckie running toward him. "More bears! Are they going to bite me?" "Oh, no," quickly answered the trained bear. "I know who they are. One of them is a friend of mine whom I met in the woods the other day. I invited him to come with me, and I see he has brought his sister. Perhaps you would like to train them to do tricks." "Ha! I think I would," said the man. "They might do tricks very nicely with you. I'll have a regular bear family." And he pulled some pieces of dried bread from out of a bag on his arm, and taking some himself, he gave the rest to the trained bear. "If you please," said Neddie, making a polite bow so low that his tail almost pointed to the sky. "If you please, did we hear you mention supper?" "You did," answered the man. "It is supper time for me and George. Rather late, it is true, but still supper time. My bear's name is George," he added. "Eat your supper, George." "I am eating it," said the trained bear, speaking in his own language, which the man understood and spoke also. Not many men can speak bear language, but this one could because his head was all bare. He was a bald-headed man, and they can mostly always speak bear language. But what about something to eat for us? Asked Beckie. Yes, added Nettie. We're hungry, and you know, George, he said, speaking to the trained bear, you said something about popcorn and cake and lollipops. I know I did, answered the trained bear, sort of confused-like and puzzled, as he ate his dried bread. But I didn't mean I had popcorn every day. I should say not, exclaimed the man, whose name was Professor. The idea! I'd soon be in the poorhouse if I gave George popcorn every day. That's only for Thanksgiving or Christmas or the like. But you are welcome to some dried bread. Then he gave Neddie and Beckie some bread from the bag, and the two bear children had to take it. They did not like it very much, but it was the best they could get, and they were hungry. Running away isn't as nice as staying home, whispered Beckie to her brother, after she had put her dolls to sleep under some dried leaves. Oh, well, it will be nice tomorrow, spoke Neddie, and anyhow, it will be Thanksgiving in a couple of days, and then we'll have plenty of good things to eat. I wonder where we will sleep, went on Beckie. I don't see any nice cave house such as we have at home. I should say not, cried Nettie. You don't live in a house after you've run away. The idea! We'll have to live out of doors, and we won't have to wash our faces and paws when we don't want to. I never mind doing that anyhow, said Beckie, who was a very clean little bear. Well, Neddie and Beckie finished their dried bread, and they wished they had some buns, or maybe even some ice cream for all I know. And then the man said, well, it is not so very late, and there is a nice moon, so I think I will see if you little new bears can do any tricks. Come now, climb that pole, and he pointed to a telegraph pole growing in the woods. Oh, we can't climb that, said Neddie quickly. Why not? Asked the man with the bald head. You must climb it if you are to be trick-trained bears. Why, the pole is too smooth and slippery, said Beckie. It has no branches sticking out to take hold of, as a tree has. Pooh, that's nothing. George can climb the pole, said his master. Show him how, George. All right, Professor, said George, free and easy-like, and up the pole he went, like a jumping jack on a string. Then Nettie tried it, but he slipped back, and so did Beckie. They had not yet learned how to stick their claws in the smooth telegraph pole and hold on. I'm afraid you'll never be trick bears, said the professor. I must teach you to climb a pole. We'll try it again tomorrow. But Neddie and Beckie did not wait until next day. All of a sudden, out from under a bush, came the biggest, scalery alligator the bear children had ever seen. Right for Beckie and Nettie the gator came, and Nettie cried, Come on, Beckie, up the pole we go, and he can't get us. Let me go first, cried Beckie. And Nettie did, most politely, and before they knew it, those two bear children had climbed the smooth telegraph pole they never thought that they could scale. And the gator could not get them. What do you think of that? Then George and the professor drove the bad alligator away, not being the least bit afraid of him, or his tail either, for that matter, and the man called, You may come down now, Beckie and Nettie. At last you have learned to climb a pole, though it did take the alligator to make you. You will never forget it. Come down and go to sleep, and in the morning we will travel on. So Beckie and Nettie came down the pole and curled up in the soft, warm leaves to sleep. And now, if the church steeple doesn't reach up and tickle the clouds so that they giggle and let a lot of rain fall on my umbrella, I'll tell you the next about Nettie doing a trick. Nettie does a trick. Neddie and Beckie Stubtail, the little children bears, did not sleep very well the first night they ran away from home to become trained animals. There were several reasons for this. In the first place, they had to sleep out of doors and not in their own nice cave house. And then, too, their papa and mama were not with them. It's lonesome, whispered Beckie, waking up in the dark and putting out her paw to touch her brother. Oh, Neddie, I wish I'd stayed home. Hush, go to sleep, advised Neddie kindly. You'll wake up George the trained bear and the professor man if you talk. Are they asleep? Whispered Beckie, feeling down in the leaves to see if her doll, Mary Ann Pudding Stick Clothespin, was all right. Sure they're asleep, answered Neddie. Hear them snore. And truly enough, you could hear that bear George snore as real as anything. Honestly, you could. What, you didn't know bears snored? Well, did you ever sleep near one? I guess not. So you see, you can't tell, but I can. And it will soon be morning, went on Neddie, and then maybe we'll travel on and not have any lessons to do, and we may get buns and popcorn. Yes, the trained bear did mention about buns, said Beckie, and then, thinking of sweet buns and crackers, she did manage to go to sleep. But oh, she did miss her mamma and Aunt Piffy, the old bear lady who was so fat. And more than once, Neddie wished he might wake up and see Uncle Wigwag, even if the old bear gentleman did play tricks on him. And as for Mr. Whitewash, the polar bear, Neddie would have given a whole penny to see him again for even a second. Still, he had run away of his own free will, Neddie had, and he must make the best of it. Besides, I like it, he said to himself. I'm going to learn to be a trained bear, and when Beckie and I get a lot of money, we'll go back home and make Mama and Papa rich. Neddie thought it would be very easy to do this. In fact, he was a very kind little bear and had not meant to do wrong when he asked Beckie to run away with him. But now, let us see what happened. Morning came at last. The sun rose from behind the hills where it had slept all night, and made a bright light through the trees from which all the leaves had now fallen. Well, children, did you sleep well? Asked George, the trained bear, as he wet his big paws in a spring of water and washed his face. Pretty well, thank you, answered Neddie politely. Do you think we will get some buns and popcorn today, George? Asked Beckie anxiously. We might, said the trained bear. I'm sorry I made you think we trained bears had that sort of food every day. But if we don't get it today, I'm sure we will on Thursday, which will be Thanksgiving. And anyhow, today we'll travel on, and you'll see me do my tricks, and you'll hear the professor blow his bugle and sing, and you'll see the people standing around to look at me and wonder, and who knows, perhaps you may do some tricks yourselves. We can climb a telegraph pole anyhow, said Beckie a bit proudly, even if it did take the alligator to scare us into doing it. Well, we'll have breakfast and travel on, said the professor after a bit. Then he reached in the bag again and pulled out some more dried bread. Only that, whispered Neddie, and he thought of what a nice meal the folks at home were having. Huckleberry pancakes, maybe, with maple sugar on, and hot buns and milk sweetened with honey. Oh dear, sighed Beckie, but she was a brave little bear girl and made up her mind not to find fault, especially after having run away when she didn't really have to. So Beckie washed the face of her rubber doll, Mary Ann Pudding Stick Clothespin, and made believe give her some breakfast. Then Beckie and Neddie ate their dried bread, and so did George, the trained bear, and the professor ate some too. Then the professor played a lively tune on his bugle. Tara-tara-ta, tara-ra-ta, tara-ta-ta-ta, he blew. It was quite nice and jolly, and made all the bears feel better. Here we go, cried the professor. Forward march. Here we go. He tossed the long pole to George, who shouldered it just like a gun, and marched on with his head high in the air, while Beckie and Neddie laughed at him. He was so funny. "Oh, I guess we'll like this after all," said Neddie. "Maybe," spoke Beckie as she hugged her rubber doll. But everyone was very sad back in the cave house where the Stubtail children lived. As soon as morning had come, Aunt Piffy, going in to call Neddie and Beckie, saw that they were not in their beds. "They're gone," cried the nice fat old lady bear. "They're up to some trick," said Uncle Wigwag, who, always playing tricks himself, thought that other bears would do the same thing. "We must find them," said Mr. Whitewash, the polar bear. But although they looked all over, they could not find Neddie and Beckie, of course, for the children were with the professor and the trained bear, far, far away. You knew that, didn't you? Oh, how badly Papa and Mama Stubtail felt, and they called a nice dog policeman to help find Neddie and Beckie. But I'll tell you about that part later. This story is about Neddie's trick. After breakfast, as I said, the professor, George, the trained bear, and Neddie and Beckie went on and on through the woods. "Soon we will come to a village," said the professor. "There George will do some of his tricks, and you little bears can climb a telegraph pole or maybe the church steeple, and then the people will laugh and clap their hands and give us things to eat." "Buns and popcorn balls?" asked Beckie anxiously. "Yes, I think so," said the professor. Soon they did come to a village, and the professor blew some sweet notes on his bugle. At once a lot of children came running out to watch the bears, and when they saw Neddie and Beckie, the children said, "Oh, aren't they cute?" One little girl even touched Beckie's fur, and Beckie liked to feel the tiny hand. Beckie and Neddie were getting so they were not afraid of real folks. Then George, the trained bear, did some of his tricks, turning somersaults, playing soldier, and the like. "Now you little bears will do a trick," said the professor. "Come, Neddie, climb a pole." And he blew on the bugle. Neddie looked for a pole to climb, but just then he saw a fat woman, almost as fat as Aunt Piffy, coming down the street. The fat woman had a basket of eggs on her arm, and the eggs were very heavy. "Oh, I must help her," said Neddie politely, for his mamma had always taught him to be polite to ladies, whether they were fat or not. So Neddie waltzed over to take the basket of eggs so that he might help the woman. She saw the bear coming, and not knowing Neddie was kind and tame and trained, she screamed and ran. Neddie ran after her, and just as he put his paw on the handle of the basket of eggs, he slipped on a banana peel, and so did the fat lady. Down they both went, ker-thump, and the basket of eggs fell also, and, well, you can imagine what happened. Neddie and the fat woman were just covered with the whites and yellows of eggs, all stuck up like. And everybody laughed like anything. Really, they could not help it. "Oh, what a fine trick," cried the boys and girls, clapping their hands. "Yes, but it is too expensive a trick to do every day," said the professor. "I shall have to pay for those eggs, I guess." And the fat woman made him pay almost $1, and nobody gave Neddie or Beckie any buns or popcorn balls either. "Well, we'll travel on," said the professor. "We may get some ice cream in the next place." So on they went after Neddie had washed off the sticky eggs from his fur in a brook of water. And next, if the rubber plant doesn't stretch itself out and take all the lumps of sugar from the salt cellar, I'll tell you about the Stubtails Thanksgiving. The Stubtails Thanksgiving. "Mama, Mama," called little Beckie Stubtail, the bear girl, as she awoke in the morning. "Oh, Mama, is breakfast ready?" "Hush," exclaimed Neddie, the little boy bear, as he reached over with his paw and patted his sister Beckie. "Mama isn't here, Beckie." "Oh, that's so, she isn't." And Beckie sat up in her bed of leaves under the tree out of the open air. Neddie was sleeping next to her, and on the other side was George, the tame, trained bear, and Professor, the man who made George do his tricks and who blew tunes on his brass horn. "Oh, dear," cried Beckie. "I thought for a minute Just for a minute, Nettie, you know, that we were back home again with Mama and Papa, and Aunt Piffy, and Uncle Wigwag, and Mr. Whitewash the polar bear, and all of our friends. But we're not, are we? No, answered Nettie, stretching out in the dried leaves so that they rustled like corn husks. We're not home, Beckie. We ran away, you know, to become trained bears, and earn money the way Jackie and Petey, Bow Wow, the puppy dog boys did when they joined the circus. Only they didn't, said Beckie, looking to see if her rubber doll, Mary Ann Pudding Stick Clothespin, was still asleep. They didn't what? Asked Nettie. They didn't earn any money, and maybe we won't. Oh, yes, we will, said Nettie. You see, we know how to do the trick of climbing the telegraph pole, and I can take a basket of eggs and fall down and break almost every one. Yes, laughed Beckie, but that's a trick the professor does not want you to do. Eggs cost too much. And she laughed again as she thought of the fat lady whose basket of eggs Nettie had tried to carry when he slipped on a banana skin and went down kerthump, as I told you in another story. Well, anyhow, we'll learn some tricks, and soon we'll get money, spoke Nettie. He and his sister, you know, had run away from their house in the nice cave to join George, the tame bear, with a ring in his nose, and the professor who made George do tricks. I wonder what we'll have for breakfast today, asked Beckie, as she saw George, the big bear, stretching himself. I hope it's something good, spoke Nettie, as he saw the professor getting up. I'm tired of dried bread, and that's all we've had so far. Yes, we haven't had any of the nice buns and popcorn balls that George told us about the day he met us in the woods, went on Beckie. Come to breakfast, Beckie and Nettie, called the professor, for he could speak and understand bear language, and he took some dried bread out of his bag. Oh, dear, exclaimed Beckie. Dear, oh, cried Nettie. Never mind, said the professor. Tomorrow will be Thanksgiving, and I'm sure something will happen between now and then, so that we shall have all the fine dinner. We will start off soon, and see if we can find our fortune, as Uncle Wiggily the rabbit gentleman did his. Come on. So the little bear children and George, the tamed bear, and the professor ate their breakfast of dried bread and drank some water from a spring, and then they traveled on again. Sometimes they would come to a little village or town, and there the professor would blow his brass horn. All the boys and girls and some of the older people would gather about in a circle. Then George, the big bear, would do his tricks, marching like a soldier, turning somersaults, waltzing, climbing a tree, or making believe wrestling with the professor. And the little bears can do tricks too, said the professor to the people. Come, Beckie, Nettie, climb a pole for the audience. Then the little Stubtail bears would stick their claws into a smooth telegraph pole, and up they would go to the very tip-top. Then you should have heard the children laugh and shout and clap their hands. The big people would put pennies in the hat of the professor, and some of the children would run in their houses and get slices of bread, or maybe an apple or something else good to eat, and give it to the bears. For George, the big fellow, as well as Beckie and Nettie, were kind, gentle, tame bears, you know. They would hurt no one. But when it came night, they had gotten nothing, like a Thanksgiving dinner, nor did they have any invitation to eat one with friends either. I wish we were home, said Beckie, and some tears came into her eyes. The tears didn't quite fall out, but almost. Well, wait until tomorrow, suggested Nettie. Something may happen then, and it isn't Thanksgiving until tomorrow, you know. Well, the next day came. It was Thanksgiving, and still there was no sign of a fine big dinner for the bears or the professor. They had slept that night in the woods, the professor cuddling up close to Big George to keep warm in the bear's thick fur. And though they had some cookies and cakes and apples to eat, it was far from being what Beckie and Nettie would have had they not run away from their cave house. We'll travel on, said the professor, and see what happens. Well, they had not gone very far before all of a sudden they saw a man running through the woods, and right after him came a big lion, roaring as loudly as he could roar, and the lion was switching his tail from side to side, and every now and then reaching out his claws to grab the man. "Oh, save me, cried the man. "Brrr," roared the lion. "Oh, can't you help the poor man?" asked Beckie of George, the big bear. "I'll try," said George. Then he ran after the lion with the long pole which the professor let George carry as a soldier gun. George tripped up the roaring lion beast. Just then the professor blew a loud blast on his brass horn, and Beckie and Neddie threw a lot of oak tree acorns at the lion. All this frightened the lion very much, especially when he felt the acorns hitting him. He thought they were bullets, and he thought the noise of the brass horn meant a lot of soldiers were coming after him. So away ran the lion through the woods, and the man was safe. Oh, how thankful he was. "You saved my life," he said to the professor, and to Neddie and Beckie and George. "What can I do for you? Where are you going?" "We are looking for a Thanksgiving dinner," said the professor, "but we have not found it yet." "Ha! Say no more," cried the man quickly. "Come with me. I will give you the best Thanksgiving dinner you ever ate." "Who are you?" asked Beckie. "I am a circus man," answered the one the lion had chased, "but we do not give shows in winter. I have all my animals in a big barn not far away. This morning that lion would not bring in a pail of milk when I asked him to, and to punish him I said he could have no dinner. So he chased me, and I don't know what he would have done had he caught me. But you saved me. The lion has run away, and I suppose a policeman monkey will catch him. But you, come to my animal barn, and you may have the dinner I was going to give the lion, as well as all you can eat besides. Come on." "Oh, at last we are going to have a Thanksgiving dinner," cried Neddie. "Oh, joy!" and Beckie clapped her paws. Then the professor and Beckie and Neddie and George, the big bear, followed the circus man. He led them to a big barn in the woods, and oh, all the animals that were there, elephants and tigers and good lions and zebras and more bears and a lot of monkeys and giraffes with necks so long they could pick an orange off a church steeple, and cunning little ponies, and a hippopotamus with a mouth like a red flannel bag, and hundreds of others. "Welcome to our Thanksgiving dinner," all the animals cried to Beckie and Neddie when they saw the Stubtail children. "Eat all you want." And such a dinner as it was, from cranberry sauce to popcorn balls and honey cakes and blueberry pie and chestnuts and cider. And oh dear, I mustn't write any more about it, or I'll get the indigespesia. Anyhow, it was a grand dinner, and in the middle of it, who should come back but the bad lion who had chased the circus man. I'm sorry I was bad," roared the lion. "May I have a piece of pie?" Then the circus man forgave him, and the lion had a good dinner, and Beckie and Neddie stayed in the circus barn all night, feeling quite happy. And I hope you have a good dinner on Thanksgiving, each and every one of you, but don't eat too much. Then on the page after this, if the fisherman doesn't blow his horn in the phonograph and scare the player piano, I'll tell you about Neddie and the elephant.